Great. Um, well, hello, everybody. Welcome to another edition of On Tyranny. It's a series that I've been doing. My name is Kurt Orzek. I'm a longtime music journalist, and I've been doing under my Bad Penny moniker. And I have a real special guest today who's going to be telling us about all of his life's adventures and all of his accomplishments, which I mean, we could spend a half hour talking about what you've done with all your accomplishments, but um, Robert Deeble, who is based in New York, is that right, Robert?
Seattle,
You're in Seattle. Oh,
the
okay.
other coast. Yeah.
Oh, cool, awesome. Um, and I think this is going to be a really, I'm really excited about this interview because I think, I've talked about sexy artists so far and all different shapes, sizes, ages, and, ethnicities and everything. And I just think that with your breadth of experience and your knowledge and travels through the world that you're gonna, I think, not to set expectations too high for you, but I think that you're gonna have a lot of interesting perspectives to share with us. So I welcome you, and I really, really do appreciate you. Number one, setting aside the time to talk with me for the series, and also having the courage to address you know, topics that a lot of people are afraid to talk about right now. And so welcome.
Thank you. It's
Yeah,
good to be
yeah,
here.
yeah. What I like to ask a lot of artists, at the top of the conversation is just how are you doing?
That's a great question. I think like most people, there's at least some level of trepidation that you feel all the time, and you kind of try to monitor it. But I'm doing well.
Good.
I think it's just it's a precarious time to feel like things are shifting. Um, in ways that feel like they don't have as much of your control,
Mm.
which in fact part of this conversation is where how we kind of, you know, come back into realization of what little areas of control we do have and how to not, put your head in the sand. But it's that typical anxiety that, if you're driving up a hill on the mountains and you're anxious of what if a semi truck has lost its brakes coming down that hill, and but you don't know that's going to happen. That just comes into your mind, and you would not be able to control that. But of course, if you're that anxious taking the curve on the mountainside, you might you might find yourself going too fast in that curve, and it may not take a semi truck. You might just go over. And so that's anxiety, right? That's how we hold it. And
Yeah.
sometimes the way that we um monitor that is, your question grounds, right?
Uh-huh.
So if, a lot of people are no longer driving anymore or looking at possibly not driving, but I still use the metaphors that we might slow down before a curve so that we can actually speed into a curve and feel more control and groundedness in the
Oh.
vehicle.
Ah,
And if something is coming our way, we would have more ability to move around it.
right. Right.
So anyway, that's, I think, there's that sort of underlying trepidation of like at 59, I'm going to be 59 this coming month, this next month.
Wow.
Uh, but I have never seen anything like that like this in my country before to this degree. So it feels really um, pudding, right?
Yeah. Can you elaborate on that?
But yeah, it's weird. My daughter's 14 and a half, and she thinks the whole thing's really funny. And I have to keep reminding her it's not really funny. It's a little scary, but I don't want to make you scared. It's just that um we can look at history and see some similar sort of things, but I haven't seen it or felt it or experienced it uh, like that in my 59 years.
Right.
And so it's weird to feel something ominously new.
Yeah.
It's okay to feel something gloriously new, but
Right. Right.
so
Yeah. The sensation you described remind me of um I was watching a podcast with Heather Cox Richardson, I think that's who it is. Yeah. Harvard professor. She's been on the fire lately doing a podcasts, and she said she grew up as well, I guess her father was a captain, a ship captain, and she likened it to the feeling that when you're in the water in the ocean and like um I'm not going to get the terminology right here, but the way like a wave hits kind of the the shore and then comes back, and then there's a wake coming from another boat, and it's like this unsettled kind of feeling.
yeah, destabilization. Yeah.
Yeah, destabilization, right. Which is part of the strategy, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. Um, so um so you know, I've gotten the sense from researching you that you've done a lot of self-introspection over the years, and that you've met a lot of people and you've done a lot of listening to people, which, as I get older, I think is kind of, those two things are married. You can't really have self-introspection without listening to people, and but when you talk about living in a state or condition that you haven't felt before, how are you coping with that?
Yeah. It's a really good question. I think I always come back to relationships. It's just the
Hmm.
the way I have come to see the world, both um, all the categories of the world that I live in, whether it's spiritually, politically, uh, philosophically, even scientifically. I see everything in terms of relationships now and the interaction of how things work
Okay.
and the balance and tension therein of all of that.
Yeah.
And so, COVID is a good example when we
Yeah.
experienced the destabilization of COVID, which in many ways kind of further ushered in what we're feeling politically, um, created a kind of a back door, if you will.
Yeah.
Um, there was some beautiful things that occurred within the pandemic to where you had to take account for the things that you had basically taken for granted for so long.
Yeah. Hmm.
And human relationships and um, the the orienting power of them was one of them, that you couldn't just go out and be a barfly anymore, but you certainly could have a meaningful conversation with your neighbor and
Right.
create new things together. I remember me and my um, the family lived next door. I had a couple of small kids, and we had a kid, and he brewed beer, and so we did these 5 foot beers, and that's what we called it whenever we were going to get together as a neighborhood. We would call it a 5 foot beer party, and we would just the kids would run around on the tricycles or whatever, and we would keep an eye on the streets so they were safe, and then just talk about what we were going through. And we were never really close prior to COVID, you know. And it was just a reminder of like, um, who's your neighbor, and how do you where are the people that you can be safe enough to really do a little bit of life with, and how valuable and reorienting that is.
Hmm.
Because we all know what happens when we get isolated or separated from one another.
Right.
But then on a larger scale of things, what we're seeing in this dynamic is kind of the imposed separation on people, that by imposing divisions and separation and polarization,
Mhm.
it's created a vacuum for power to exist that it didn't exist before.
Understood.
And when I use the word divisive or division, I want to be careful there, because that word gets used a lot by people that may unconsciously be defending some of these powers, and like, don't be divisive, don't,
Oh yeah, 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 yeah.
and I think it's important to
Right,
realize
right.
that there's a difference between being divisive and being differentiated. And being differentiated is when
Mhm.
we hold our differences together in a beautiful postmodern construct that truth is more real and true and penetrable
Mhm.
when we have the differences of each other.
Sure.
And so, one of the scary things about the time that we're living in, I mean, it's scary to see, the whole Project 2025 thing, and everything that is happening federally. But
Right.
I kind of pay attention to is how, um, everyday people have been polarized and separated,
Yeah.
um, and how we are unable to bring the best of ourselves together in that.
Right.
And
Right. Right.
I don't know how that lands with you,
Yeah.
but I'm sure if we get out of this mess, there will be, you know, a a counterbalance, and that counterbalance will be whatever the other uh, group of power might be, to try to correct whatever went horribly wrong in the first.
Yeah.
And that's where I think, in some ways, we have to even be even more careful, because in that counterbalance, we could play by the same playbook,
Yeah.
you
Yeah.
know? And I think it may not happen in my lifetime, but ultimately,
Mhm.
I think the way back, some people are not going to like this, but I think that ultimately the way back is some forms of bipartisanship in which we locate each other's core values.
Right.
And
Right.
I'm not pie in the sky about
Yeah.
that. I
Yeah.
don't believe that's going to happen anytime soon. There's so much rupture that has occurred
Right.
that you can't just willy-nilly go back to that.
Right.
Um, but ultimately, that's where we are our best.
Yeah. Well, touching on, I think maybe three different points you made, which is, sort of the bipartisan um, uh, topic or theme, and then also the divisiveness, and then also um, the the realization that people have to take things take matters into their own hands in the face of disasters. Like we saw what happened with, for example, the Texas flooding, when FEMA didn't show up,
Yeah.
or North Carolina. I would, and then also, I think you mentioned how you try not to focus too much on some of the horrors that are going on because you want to focus on the relationship. So all of which is to say that to me, um, I kind of look at it as all in one, which is to say, um, when you see footage of ICE agents coming into Chicago, you have neighbors coming out in their pajamas with whistles. These people,
Yeah,
they're neighbors, but they don't really know each other.
which is
And
awesome.
they don't, yeah, and they don't know their political affiliations. And that
Hmm.
reminds me a lot of during COVID when people would have those whistles at the 5 p.m. mark.
Uh-huh.
You know, and it's sort of like almost bringing us back down to like um, the core ideas of what it means to live together as a just on a base level as a society. And
Yeah. I
uh,
wanted to bring up, I wanted to kind of nuance a point that you brought back, and that is it would be a horrific mistake not to focus on the horrors that are happening.
sorry, yeah, yeah.
Yeah. Uh, and I think that
Mm,
uh,
mhm.
this gets really nuanced. It's harder to explain, but if people just focus on the positive things, they can succumb to the temptation of just being Pollyanna
Yeah,
and not being grounded in the reality that's around. It's a form of disassociation, right?
yeah,
Um, and then sometimes if we only focus on the horror, uh, we we end up being just shock and awe all the time, right?
mhm,
Which so everything has a balance point. And I think for me, this is just personally, but as I um, as I reflect a public persona of objection to what's happening,
mhm.
particularly around ICE agents and the cruelty towards immigrants,
Yeah,
because I'm very involved in that in my world, privately, my vocational world. I'm involved with immigrants a lot. So it's just I can't take on all stories all at once, but that one's very close to my heart.
yeah,
Um, my point of reference in objecting to what's going on is always aimed at trying to stir the conscience of others who haven't wanted to look at it.
yes, yes, yeah,
And that's different because
yeah,
I think in my anger, what I want to do
yeah,
is to judge them
right.
and in a justice streak, shame them for what they let happen.
Makes it easier for both sides.
Yeah.
Yeah,
People accuse me all the time of letting, liberal talking points speak for me or whatever. And I have the hardest time trying to come back to people to say, that is not what informs my position. My
mhm,
position has been informed from the very beginning around my values.
yeah, yeah,
And if those values are being reflected by one particular party, that doesn't mean that I am, worshiping that party. Or it's just funny if you try to be a humane person, you get accused of being, you know, you know, uh,
yeah,
something. And it's like, how do we get back to finding that same core value that I know exists in other people?
yeah, yeah.
Um, and it's there's a fine some fine dancing around that.
Mhm,
I
mhm,
had a client one time that was very, very conservative, and we had some really interesting conversations together. And I signaled to him that I was very open to what he had to say, and we developed a good rapport in that. And sometimes I would say or reference things in a way that he objected to. And I referenced the detainment centers as concentration camps.
mhm.
And he pushed back really hard and said that it's not fair to call this, a Nazi sort of thing. And I said, okay, I will take that point for a minute and we will just hold it together. You're right. We don't know what's happening in those detainment camps. It feels a lot similar to when people didn't know what was happening in those other detainment camps until they later got them. But I said, you've seen the pictures, you've seen how concentrated they are.
Yeah.
That's why I use the word concentration, because that is exactly the scope of the inhumaneness of it. It doesn't mean that these folks are going to be loaded up on a train and disappear somewhere, but then we don't know that, do we?
No, but we do know that people are just being disappeared as well. So, but yeah, not to
And
deviate.
so my point was not to simply compromise with him,
Right,
but
right.
to say he was kind of reacting to, am I overreacting? And
Yeah,
that's what I notice in these arguments all the time.
yeah,
No one takes a serious conversation serious because they say, you're overreacting,
yeah.
so I'm not going to take it.
That's right.
And I'm like, okay, I'll meet you there in the middle and let's see if we can find your value system.
Sure. Right.
And do you feel it's okay for your gardener, your cook, and whatever to be disposed to countries they've never even been to, regardless of how you feel around
Yeah.
if they had a misdemeanor involved in being here. And
Right.
that's where people start to melt
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
and
Yeah.
they start to go, well, I don't like the way this is being handled.
Yeah. Right. I mean, we're only 30 years removed from, was it William Bennett who wrote the book A Call to Character, I think.
Mm, okay,
Uh,
yeah.
and then we're even closer removed from the moral majority and the compassionate conservatives.
Right.
I mean,
Mhm.
all these terms were imbued with a sense of, they were tied into value or personal value that you hold, integrity. I mean, think of how some of the Congress people who got ousted in the 90s and early aughts were, thrown out because of integrity reasons. And, and those same conditions would just be, I mean, a great example is George Santos getting commuted. But not to ramble or get too far off, but yeah, I think this is a really good point. It's a point that has not been brought up in most, if not any of the conversations I've had so far, is getting through to people's or just getting to understand the value in aspect and just the character aspect as well, because but it seems like a huge barrier there is the loyalty, which is the only value
Hmm.
that I see that the right has. It doesn't matter what you do as long as you're loyal. And along with that, there is a overlap, intertwining, call it what you will, of and I'm Catholic, but like but religious fundamentalism, And once you have that set mentality, it seems impenetrable. It seems just like you cannot, it seems like, you know, um,
Yeah, and it breaks my heart.
yeah,
It
yeah,
really does. And I've lost a lot of fans because of it.
yeah. Can you talk in the last moments we have about how you are channeling this into your music? Do you find yourself writing more songs about the people that you've encountered, about their stories, putting yourself in their perspective, as opposed to, first person? How is everything, you've always put a lot of thought into these matters. How is that impacting your music? And yeah,
Well, just about every song on the record does talk about a relational dysfunction where we become polarized and separate, from the marital demise of AP Carter and Sarah Carter to um, um, Fahrenheit 451 is what's being referenced in the song Pleasure to Burn.
yeah,
And yet, that the angle of that book that I'm portraying in the song is really the thawing of Montag, who was part of the problem, right?
Mhm.
He's the one burning the books, and he starts thawing to the realization. He starts coming into contact with his own humanity.
Mm, mm,
You might say there's some sort of rebirth in him where he comes back to being fully human.
mm,
And
mhm,
that's what I hope for, that we will come back to being fully human.
mhm,
And in the song not on your team, um, that has some pretty personal connotations for me because, you mentioned you're Catholic. I grew up in a family that was very evangelical, and I grew up in that culture. Um, and I was very fortunate to kind of grow in various ways. I won't say I left evangelicalism, but I grew spiritually in a lot of really meaningful ways. When I got into college, I really learned. I had some wonderful professors that, taught from a literary standpoint of reading ancient religious texts and how to really get so much more out of them. And when we do, we find all these subversive aspects that are really exciting about some of these flannel board stories we learned in church and that kind of thing. And so,
like
uh,
the mystics. I don't know.
yeah, absolutely. But just even a good quality scholarship around what was the audience, what was the culture, what do those words in either Greek or Hebrew, what were other alternative uses of those same words? And so when you broaden the narrative, suddenly more and more makes sense.
Mhm.
And so, like you talked about, people in a religious orientation just, I forget the word you used, but they can't seem to escape this authoritarian way of thinking, right?
Dogmatic,
Yeah,
I guess. Maybe.
dogmatic, rigid. And that's exactly what happens in this the story that Jesus tells of the Good Samaritan.
Yeah.
He's asked a question by a lawyer who's so dogmatic about, his law, which would be, you know, um, the Jewish law.
Mhm.
And, you know, Jesus tells this amazing story about a guy who's wounded on the road, and two people from the church walk around him. And I can't think the people that don't, when they hear the story, they don't realize that's what they were supposed to do by the law, because the person was beat unto death is the phrase. And you cannot touch death and serve in the temple.
Oh, yeah.
And so what
Yeah.
what
Yeah.
Christ was saying to the lawyer is your religion cannot save you. There's
Mm,
something else that's intuitive, that you're not
mm,
being intuitive with your religion.
yeah.
And so there's some just beautiful depth to that. But, following my bachelor's degree in college, I went over to South Africa, and I lived in townships for a little while, and I was a part of um, a faith-based social justice work by some ministers over there that were fighting apartheid with everything they had. So I had this real wonderful experience of seeing a, a faith that was engaged in the world, not just disappearing from the world or being dissociated.
Yeah.
And there's so much of that in the Catholic tradition as well, Dorothy Day and all of that. So it's such a rich part of that, but that has all been lost with this current sort of thing. But the song Not on Your Team
Mhm.
is a little bit of a,
Yeah.
turning the knife a bit because it was a very careful study that I did on the Book of Amos, which is a book of protest. And
Oh,
um, most religious people don't realize that.
uh-huh.
He was protesting his um, religious authority for the way they were inhumanely treating people. And obviously, he wasn't successful of it. The government basically said, we'll have nothing to do with you.
Yeah.
But
Yeah.
that book and the poetry of that book gets canonized. And so I literally take the poetry from that book and use it in the chorus. And it's a way of subtly kind of maybe dishing back to some of the fans who, uh, you know, maybe don't want anything to do with me, based on, how the positions I have in the real world, of like, go read your book.
Right. Right. Exactly. Yeah.
And it's not, me trying to be snarky.
Right.
It's
Right.
kind of saying there's more here,
Yeah.
regardless of whether you believe in a God or not. Every single person on this planet is so beautiful and so important.
Yeah.
And your book says that.
Yeah.
So, lean into it.
Yeah.
And let's,
And while you're at it, read the Constitution that you keep in your pocket that you tell everybody about, you know?
we're so lucky. We are so lucky to have a document like that. And
Yeah.
it is so disturbing to see, uh, our country just teeter on, you know, yeah, it can't begin to tell you how frustrating it has been to see some of these core things in our Constitution just being looped around,
Yeah.
you know,
Yeah.
and
Hollowed out.
hollowed out.
Yeah.
Yeah. And it just,
Yeah.
yeah, it's mind-boggling,
Yeah.
especially when it affects, just core human rights.
Right. Right.
Um,
Well, we got just a couple minutes left, and I don't like these videos to be cut off. So I just wanted to say, I think the message that you've conveyed today has been extremely um, unique, special, precious, beautiful, and I really I hope that that this goes viral. You know,
there's
but it's
something that Timothy Snyder said that really struck me, and that he,
that's
you
why I named
know,
my series on tyranny.
yeah, right. He said there can't be one party with a healthy
That's right.
institution. You
That's
can't
right.
have a one-party system.
Yeah,
I think that there's a lot of us right now that just want that. We want a party that's not going to drive us into tyranny.
yeah,
And
yeah,
um, I think while I've been a Democrat most of my life, I really hope in the years to come that the fever can break in the GOP,
yeah.
and reasonable, thoughtful, reflective, um, people of a conservative political, uh, platform can come back into the conversation so that we have a good conversational partner.
Yeah, yeah.
Because I think all good politics is a dialogue.
Mhm.
I might care a lot more about the social services and caring for the people that are on every day on the street.
Yeah,
And you might care more about putting that money into military services, or I'm not saying you would, but someone else might want a powerful military. And both of those uh, points are important. It's just where do we find the priorities around them?
yeah, they're not mutually exclusive. I mean,
Yeah,
especially when you have the VA being cut and you have all the
totally.
you have millions of dollars from the military going to ICE. I mean, it just doesn't make any logical sense. So it's just, yeah,
And I
it's,
think one of the
it's
things
slapstick. Yeah, sorry.
we've run into as I look at politics from an armchair standpoint is that, um, liberals no longer have a good, conversational partner or debate partner.
Mhm.
If,
Yeah,
if somebody's just gone down the rabbit trail of QAnon, there's no conversation left.
no, no, I know.
And so,
Yeah, I was ready to lace up my boxing gloves before we got online here and we could out with you.